Take one day, share it into sections. To each section, apportion its task. Leave no stray unemployed quarters of an hour, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, include all. Do each piece of business in its turn with method, with rigid regularity. The day will close almost before you are aware it has begun, and you are indebted to no one for helping you to get rid of one vacant moment. You have had to seek no one's company, conversation, sympathy, forbearance. You have lived, in short, as an independent being out to do. Take this advice, the first and last I should offer you. Then you will not want me or anyone else, happen what may. Neglect it, go on as heretofore, craving, whining, and idling, and suffer the results of your idiocy, however bad and insufferable they may be. I tell you this plainly, and listen, for though I shall no more repeat what I am now about to say, I shall steadily act on it. After my mother's death, I wash my hands of you. From the day his coffin is carried to the vault in Gateshead Church, you and I will be as separate as if we had never known each other. You need not think that because we had chanced to be born of the same parents, I shall suffer you to fasten me down by even the feeblest claim. I can tell you this, if the whole human race, ourselves excepted, were swept away, and we too stood alone on the earth, I would leave you in the old world, and betake myself to the new. She closed her lips. You might have spared yourself the trouble of delivering that tirade, answered Georgiana. Everybody knows you are the most selfish, heartless creature in existence, and I know your spiteful hatred towards me. I've had a specimen of it before in the trick you played me about Lord Edwin Eyre. You could not bear me to be raised above you, to have a title, to be received in the circus where you dare not to show your face, and so you acted the spy and informer, and ruined my prospects for ever. Georgiana took out her handkerchief and blew her nose for an hour afterwards. Eliza sat cold, impassible, and assiduously industrious. True, generous feeling is made small account of by some, but there were two natures rendered, the one intolerably acrid, the other despicably savourless, for the want of it. Feeling without judgment is a washy draught indeed, but judgment untempered by feeling is too bitter and husky a morsel for human deglutition. It was a wet and windy afternoon. Georgiana had fallen asleep on the sofa over the perusal of a novel. Eliza was gone to attend the Saint's Day service at the new church, for in matters of religion she was a rigid formalist. No weather ever prevented the punctual discharge of what she considered her devotional duties, fair or foul. She went to the church thrice every Sunday, and as often on weekdays as there were prayers. I bethought myself to go upstairs and see how the dying woman sped, who lay there almost unheeded. The very servants paid her but a remittent attention. The hired nurse, being little looked after, was slipped out of the room whenever she could. Bessie was faithful, but she had her own family to mind, and could only come occasionally to the hall. I found the sick room unwatched, as I had expected. No nurse was there, the patient lay still, and seemingly lethargic. Her livid face sunk in the pillows, the fire was dying in the grate. I renewed the fuel, rearranged the bedclothes, gazed a while on her, who could not now gaze on me, and then I moved away to the window. The rain beat strongly against the panes. The wind blew tempestuously. One lies there, I thought, who will soon be beyond the world of earthly elements. Whither will that spirit now struggling to quit its material tenement flit when at length released? In pondering the great mystery, I thought of Ellen Burns, recalled her dying words, her faith, her doctrine of the equality of disembodied souls. I was still listening in thought to her well-remembered tones, still picturing her pale and spiritual aspect, her wasted face and sublime gaze, as she lay on her placid deathbed, and whispered her longing to be restored to her divine father's bosom, when a feeble voice murmured from the couch behind, "Who is that?" I knew Mrs. Reed had not spoken for days. Was she reviving? I went up to her. "It is I, Aunt Reed." "Who I?" was the answer. "Who are you?" Looking at me with surprise and a sort of alarm, but still not wildly. "You are quite a stranger to me. Where is Bessie?" "She is at the lodge, Aunt." "Aunt?" she repeated. "Who calls me aunt? You are not one of the Gibsons. And yet I know you. That face, and the eyes and forehead are quite familiar to me. You are like... Why, you are like Jane Eyre." I said nothing. I was afraid of occasioning some shock by declaring my identity. "Yet," said she, "I'm afraid it is a mistake. My thoughts deceive me. I wish to see Jane Eyre and I fancy a likeness when no one exists. Besides, in 8 years she must be so changed." I now gently assure her that I was the person she supposed and desired me to be, and seeing that I was understood and that her senses were quite collected, I explained how Bessie had sent her husband to fetch me from Thornfield. "I'm very ill, you know," she said ere long. "I was trying to turn myself a few moments since, and find I cannot move a limb. It is as well I should ease my mind before I die. What we think little of in health burdens us at such an hour as the present is to me. Is the nurse here, or is there no one in the room but you?" I assured her we were alone. "Well, I have twice done you a wrong which I regret now. One was in breaking the promise which I gave my husband to bring you up as my own child. The other—" She stopped. "After all, it is of no great importance, perhaps," she murmured to herself. "And then I may get better, and to humble myself so to her is painful." She made an effort to alter her position, but failed. Her face changed. She seemed to experience some inward sensation, the precursor, perhaps, of the last pang. "Well, I must get it over. Eternity is before me. I better tell her. Go to my dressing case, open it, and take out a letter you will see there." I obeyed her directions. "Read the letter," she said. It was short, and thus conceived. "Madam, will you have the goodness to send me the address of my niece, Jane Eyre, and tell me how she is? It is my intention to write shortly and desire her to come to me at Madeira. Providence has blessed my endeavours to secure a competency, and as I am unmarried and childless, I wish to adopt her during my life, and bequeath her at my death whatever I may have to leave. I am, madam, etc., etc., John Eyre, Madeira." It was dated 3 years back. Why did I never hear of this? I asked. "Because I disliked you too fixedly and thoroughly, ever to lend a hand in lifting you to prosperity. I could not forget your conduct to me, Jane, the fury with which you once turned on me, the tone in which you declared you abhorred me the worst of anybody in the world, the unchildlike look and voice with which you affirmed that the very thoughts of me made you sick, and asserted that I had treated you with miserable cruelty. I could not forget my own sensations when you thus started up and poured out the venom of your mind. I felt fear, as if an animal that I had struck or pushed had looked up at me with human eyes and cursed me in a man's voice. Bring me some water. Oh, make haste." "Dear Mrs. Reed," said I, as I offered her the draught she required, Think no more of all this. Let it pass away from your mind. Forgive me for my passionate language. I was a child then. 8, 9 years have passed since that day. She heeded nothing of what I said, but when she had tasted the water and drawn breath, she went on thus. I tell you I could not forget it, and I took my revenge, for you to be adopted by your uncle, placed in a state of ease and comfort, was what I could not endure. I wrote to him, said I was sorry for his disappointment, but Janaya was dead. She had died of typhus fever at Lowood. Now act as you please, write and contradict my assertion, expose my falsehood as soon as you like. You were born, I think, to be my torment. My last hour is racked by a recollection of a deed which, but for you, I should never have been tempted to commit. If you could but be persuaded to think no more of it, and to regard me with kindness and forgiveness. You have a very bad disposition, said she, and one to this day I feel it impossible to understand. How for 9 years you could be patient and quiescent under any treatment, and in the 10th break out all fire and violence. I can never comprehend. My disposition is not so bad as you think. I am passionate but not vindictive. Many a time as a little child I should have been glad to love you, if you would have let me, and I long earnestly to be reconciled to you now. Kiss me, aunt. I approached my cheek to her lips. She would not touch it. She said I oppressed her by leaning over the bed, and again demanded water. As I lay her down, for I raised her and supported her on my arm while she drank, I covered her ice-cold and clammy hands with mine. The feeble fingers shrank from my touch. The glazing eyes shunted my gaze. Love me then, or hate me as you will, I said at last. You have my full and free forgiveness. Ask now for God's, and be at peace. Poor, suffering woman. It was too late for her to make now the effort to change her habitual frame of mind. Living, she had ever hated me. Dying, she must hate me still. The nurse now entered, and Bessie followed. I yet lingered half an hour longer, hoping to see some sign of amity. But she gave none. She was fast relapsing into stupor, nor did her mind again rally. At 12 o'clock that night she died. I was not present to close her eyes, nor were either of her daughters. They came to tell us the next morning that all was over. She was by that time laid out. Eliza and I went to look at her. Georgiana, who had burst out into loud weeping, said she dared not to go. There was stretched Sarah's Reed's once robust and active frame, rigid and still. Her eye, of flint, was covered with its cold lid. Her brow and strong traits wore yet the impress of her inexorable soul. A strange and solemn object was that corpse to me. I gazed on it with gloom and pain. Nothing soft, nothing sweet, nothing pitying or hopeful, or subduing did it inspire. Only a grating anguish for her woes, nor my loss, and a sombre tearless dismay at the fearfulness of death in such a form. Eliza surveyed her parent calmly. After a silence of some minutes, she observed, with her constitution she should have lived to a good old age. Her life was shortened by trouble. And then a spasm constricted her mouth for an instant. As it passed away, she turned and left the room. And so did I. Neither of us had dropped a tear.